Australia A versus Samoa will be the first game that we are talking about. I'd love to be able to make these lights go in those colours. One moment. Right, it seems like the lights don't actually like me very much. This is the first game of the weekend that we are covering on the channel. Australia A taking on Samoa, and it is actually going to be taking place in Suva, Fiji, as part of the PACIFC Nations Cup. Now, both of these sides, they are stacked full of talented players from Super Rugby Pacific, including about 8 debuts that Samoa are making for this fixture. But first of all, we will be looking through at the Australia A side. So I will pop it up on the screen now for you guys who haven't seen the lineup. As you can see, a lot of players who probably were a bit unlucky not to get selected for the Wallabies, but they could only take so many into their series up against England. The likes of a Fraser McWright, Reece Hodge, a couple of those guys possibly would have liked to see themselves in the Wallabies, but these players, like I mentioned, they've all played throughout Super Rugby Pacific, so they'll have that little bit of chemistry built. Few Reds players in there, a couple Waratahs players making their way into the side. Now, something I normally do in my previews is look through at 3 key players who I feel will be able to have a big impact throughout this fixture. First of all, I have got Fraser McWright. I mentioned him a little bit earlier on. He was sensational in the breakdown for the Reds throughout Super Rugby Pacific, so I wouldn't be surprised if he gets himself a couple turnovers, although it may cost him a couple big knocks, because at the end of the day, these Samoan boys, they are not small. They will run straight over the top of you if you are in the wrong place in the breakdown. So McWright, he's probably going to get himself a couple turnovers, but also in the process may get himself a concussion just to go alongside it. But Will Harris, he is another player in that loose forward trio for Australia A, played for the Waratahs throughout Super Rugby Pacific, was very impressive as well. He started the season like a house on fire. Unfortunately, did kind of slow down a little bit near the end of the season, but I think he should still be able to have himself a pretty solid game, as he himself is pretty solid as well. Then the last name that I have got, it is the other vice-captain. So Fraser McWright, one vice-captain, Reece Hodge, he is the other. He's going to be at fullback for this game, and he had a dreadful start to the Super Rugby Pacific competition. He won't mind me saying that either, because at the end of the day, he ended up with a red card, a yellow card. I think he got injured, and then he got another red card or a yellow. He was having a shocker, but he turned it around massively, and the Rebels, they actually finished the season not too badly. I believe they finished in 10th, but they did have a couple wins for this season. But Reece Hodge, I think under the high ball, he's going to be very important. If the penalty does come on about the halfway line, he won't hesitate to try and kick it over. Although they've also got Ryan Lonergan, who can kick from 50 metres out, which is very impressive compared with the fact that he is the halfback for the Brumbies throughout Super Rugby Pacific. But with Reece Hodge out there, I think he's definitely going to have to make sure that he controls that back line and make sure that the youngsters who are alongside him are doing the job that is required. Now, looking through at Samoa, they haven't played a game since July of 2021, and that was actually up against Tonga in the Rugby World Cup qualifiers. They were able to go 2-0 up in that series, but they were supposed to be playing the Barbarians in around November, and it is a big shame that we didn't get to see that game happen. I believe it was about 3 hours before kickoff. They said, right, we've got too many cases and we have to cancel the game. It was disappointing, because the thing is, some of these guys would have actually gone head-to-head in that matchup, because Australia, they had quite a few players making their way into that Barbarian side, alongside the likes of Pablo Matera, Malcolm Marks, Stephen Kitsoff. It was a great Barbarian squad, but we didn't get to see that matchup quite take place. But now we do get to see Samoa in action as part of this PACIFC Nations Cup. Looking through at their 3 key players that I have decided will be able to have a big impact. Samuel Slade is the first. He was playing well throughout Super Rugby Pacific for Moana Pacifica. He has got some Samoan caps under his belt as well, which is very handy to have with some experience at international level. But he did play well. He's great in a line-out. He can also slot into that loose forward trio if they do have any sort of injuries for Samoa throughout the early stages of this contest, but I think he will be a big one at line-out time. He is going head-to-head with a couple Reds players, but he has faced them before in Super Rugby Pacific. The next name that I have got, it is Alamanda Matangi. He's great in the breakdown, similar to Fraser McWright, and I think he will be able to get himself 1 or 2 turnovers and also bring that physicality towards Fraser McWright. See if he can make him crumble a bit towards that 60-minute mark. Then the last name that I've got, it's actually a debut for Samoa, but I've watched this man for a while. He plays for Hawke's Bay in the Bunnings NPC. He was signed with the Hurricanes in Super Rugby, but this season did make his way over to Moana Pacifica, and that is Lolagi Vizier. He didn't get a huge amount of game time throughout the season, but this man has got size, he's got power, and when he gets a little bit of time on the ball, you can certainly see those skills start to come out. So he is going to be a dangerous one, even though he's on debut. If he plays like he did in Super Rugby Pacific, and also like he does for the Magpies, I think he will be absolutely fine at international level. But now we're up to that stage how I try and predict who will be able to win this match. It's going to be a tricky one. Australia, they have got their hands full with England which is why a majority of those very good players have ended up in that side. But Australia A is still looking very tough. Samoa, they will be bringing the physicality. They've got a few new names, and I think it might be just a few too many new names for them to be able to get themselves a win over Australia. So I'm going to say Australia win this matchup, and I am going to say that they do end up winning it by 11 for my prediction there. Bloody worked, didn't it? That was quite handy.